Booker T. Washington. For about 25 years, from 1890 to 1915, this man was arguably the most powerful black leader in America. He was an educator, an author, an advisor to presidents. He built institutions from pretty much nothing. But he was, and he still is, one of the most controversial figures in American history. So was he a brilliant pragmatist, or was he a dangerous compromiser? Let's dig in. To really understand Washington, you have to start with his own words. This quote from his incredible autobiography, Up from Slavery, it's basically the key to his entire philosophy. For him, life wasn't about where you ended up, but how far you had to travel to get there. And let me tell you, his own journey began at the furthest possible starting point. You see, his early life wasn't just a backstory. It was the very furnace that forged his worldview. The experience of being enslaved and then that fight for freedom and for knowledge would shape every single decision he made as a leader. Just look at this incredible path. Born into slavery in 1856, he didn't even know his own birthday. When he was freed as a kid, he worked in salt furnaces and coal mines, all while teaching himself to read. His hunger for an education was so intense that in 1872, he walked a huge chunk of the 500 miles just to attend the Hampton Institute. Then, only 9 years later, at just 25 years old, he's tapped to lead a brand new school in Alabama, the Tuskegee Institute. So, Tuskegee, this becomes his laboratory, his grand experiment. It wasn't just about starting a school. No, it was about building a model for how Black people could progress in the South after Reconstruction. And his whole vision, it was centered on one core idea: building economic power from the ground up. And this focused on what they called industrial education. That was the whole ballgame. Washington believed that in a deeply prejudiced America, demanding abstract political rights was a losing fight. The first step, he argued, was to become essential to the local economy. Learn a trade, buy land, start a business, prove your economic value, and then, he believed, civil rights would have to follow. And you really can't argue with the results. I mean, he started Tuskegee in a single donated room. By the time he died, it was this massive campus with an endowment worth tens of millions in today's money. The man was an absolute master at fundraising and building something that lasts. All right, so in 1895, Washington gets this huge invitation to speak at a major exposition in Atlanta. This one speech would make him a national celebrity and pretty much define his public legacy. It became known, especially by his critics, as the Atlanta Compromise. He basically gets up there and lays out a deal. He told a mostly white audience that Black Americans would not agitate for an end to Jim Crow segregation or for the right to vote. In return, he asked for a fair chance at economic progress and education. Now, this was a message that a lot of white Americans, North and South, were very eager to hear. But not everyone was cheering. For a growing number of Black intellectuals, especially up north, Washington's speech felt like a profound betrayal. It was like he was trading away fundamental human rights for just a few economic crumbs. And this opposition found its most powerful voice in the brilliant scholar and activist W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois slapped this label on him, the Great Accommodator. And man, that was a stinging critique. It painted Washington as a leader who was way too willing to accommodate, to just accept, the racist structure of American society. For Du Bois and his allies, this wasn't a compromise, it was a total surrender. So this really breaks it down for you, right? This was the fundamental disagreement over the future of Black America. On one side, you have Washington's go slow strategy: learn a trade, build wealth, and be patient. On the other side, Du Bois is demanding immediate civil rights, full political equality, and a classical education to create a talented 10th, an elite group of Black leaders who would pull the rest of the race up. These were two radically different roadmaps. For decades, that was pretty much the story you heard. Washington the accommodator versus Du Bois the agitator. But then historical records started to reveal a much more complicated picture. And it makes you wonder, was the man the public saw the whole man? Because as it turns out, while Booker T. Washington was publicly preaching accommodation, he was privately waging a secret war against the very system he seemed to accept. And this part is it's astounding. While he's out there publicly telling Black Americans, hey, don't worry about politics, he's secretly funneling his own money and money from his wealthy donors into the biggest legal battles against segregation and voter suppression of the time. He was fighting a two-front war, one in public, building economic power, and another one in the shadows, attacking Jim Crow in the courts. So, okay, putting aside the debate over his methods for just a second, his tangible accomplishments are just undeniable. He left behind a legacy that was built out of brick and mortar and of institutions that served Black communities for generations. I mean, he founded the National Negro Business League to help Black entrepreneurs. His book, Up from Slavery, became a global bestseller, inspiring millions. And in 1901, his invitation to dine with President Theodore Roosevelt at the White House, that created a national firestorm, but it also shattered a huge racial barrier. And if you need one more concrete example, just look at this number. Working with the philanthropist Julius Rosenwald, Washington helped create a program that built over 5,000 modern schools for Black children all across the rural South. For hundreds of thousands of kids, these Rosenwald schools were their only shot at a real education. So we're left with this essential question, aren't we? Was Booker T. Washington a brilliant pragmatist, just doing what he had to do to survive and build in a brutally hostile world? Or was he a placater whose go-slow approach actually held back the march toward true equality? There really is no easy answer, and his complex, contradictory legacy continues to challenge us today.